The screen froze, but not from internet lag. Time itself seemed to crystallize around my mother's words, each syllable forming perfect cutting ice. "We don't want to see your face at her graduation." No softening, no preamble, just the clean surgical removal of me from a family moment. On the Zoom grid, my sister Sloane's lips curved in that particular way they did when she'd won something she'd been working toward for weeks. My father's eyes flickered to the corner of his screen, to that safe space where he'd spent my entire childhood retreating. And my mother, Eleanor, stared through the pixelated distance with the steady gaze of a judge delivering a verdict she'd already written years before. But before I tell you what happened next, before the quiet unraveling that would change everything, I need to ask you something. Where are you right now? On your phone during a commute? At home, after putting the kids to bed? And be honest, when was the last time you swallowed something you should have spit out? My name is Cassandra, though they called me Cassie when they wanted something, and for 32 years I believed love was a debt I'd been born owing. The call ended without my response. The four squares vanished, leaving my own reflection floating in a black void. My face looked strangely calm. Inside, something tectonic shifted, a shelf deep in my psyche where I'd stored every compromise, every silenced protest, every "it's fine." When it wasn't fine at all, it collapsed, and in the dust I saw clearly for the first time. I didn't cry, I didn't call back, I simply reached for the one thing they never imagined I'd reclaim, my entire life. But let me rewind, because the poison wasn't in that moment, it was in the soil we'd all been planted in. Our family was a beautiful, curated garden. Eleanor was the master gardener, meticulous, controlling, with a vision for how every plant should grow. My father, Richard, was the trellis, silent, supportive, bending to her design without question. Sloane, my younger sister by 3 years, was the prize rose, cherished, showcased, watered with devotion. And I was the shade plant, useful for filling difficult corners, expected to thrive with whatever light filtered down from the canopy above. I learned the rules early. Love was conditional, affection was currency, and my value was directly tied to my utility. When I was 8 and Sloane was 5, she wanted my favorite doll, a porcelain thing my grandmother had given me before she died. When I hesitated, Eleanor knelt before me, her voice honeyed steel.
"Cassie, be a good sister. Sharing is how we show love." I handed it over. Sloane broke its arm off within the hour. When I cried, Eleanor sighed. "It's just a thing, Cassandra. Don't be materialistic." That pattern became the rhythm of my childhood. My achievements were nice, but Sloane's were celebrated with parties. My needs were dramatic. Hers were emergencies. I escaped to college on a scholarship they never helped me secure, studying architectural preservation while Sloane floated through a series of passion projects funded by our parents. But distance didn't break the pattern, it just lengthened the strings. The first request came disguised as pride, a call during my junior year. Eleanor's voice trembled with manufactured tears. "Your father's investments took a hit. Sloane's art school tuition. Could you help? Just this semester?" I'd just landed my first paid internship. The money felt like freedom, but the old programming activated. "Of course," I said, the words tasting like surrender. Just this semester became every semester. Then it became Sloane's studio apartment, her materials, her networking trips to galleries. When I graduated and moved to Boston for my first real job at a historical preservation firm, the requests evolved. They became demands. 5 years passed. I became successful in the quiet way that doesn't make family proud. Steady promotions, respect in a niche field, a carefully built life. I bought a modest brownstone in Beacon Hill, restoring it myself on weekends. It was my sanctuary, the first thing that felt entirely mine. Sloane, meanwhile, had settled into her role as the family's creative genius, a title that required constant financial nourishment. Her art shifted mediums every year. ceramics to digital installations to experiential sculpture, each transition necessitating new equipment, new studio space, new opportunity investments. The requests grew bolder. One evening, Eleanor called, her voice tight. Sloan has a chance to show at a pop-up gallery in Chelsea. The fee is $15,000. It's career-making. I was reviewing blueprints for a threatened Carnegie library. Mom, that's nearly my entire savings buffer. A pause, then the weaponized sigh. I thought you believed in family. I thought you wanted your sister to succeed. Guilt, that old familiar anchor, pulled at me. Let me see what I can do. What I could do was delay the brownstone's roof repair. What I could do was work overtime for 3 months. What I could do was tell myself this was the last time, even as I knew it wasn't. The thank you, when it came, was a group text from Sloan. Gallery secured. Thanks everyone for your support. As if I were one of many, not the sole funder. The real turning point came on a Tuesday. I was working from home when a delivery arrived, a massive crate addressed to me but requiring signature confirmation. Puzzled, I opened it to find a bronze sculpture, abstract and aggressive, with a note, "For your collection, gallery price $22K family discount, Sloan." She'd bought her own artwork with my money and gifted it back to me. The audacity took my breath away. When I called, she laughed. "You're always complaining you don't have original art. Now you do. Consider it an investment." That night, I did something I'd never done. I logged into our family's shared cloud storage, something Eleanor had set up years ago for family memories. I found more than vacation photos. I found spreadsheets. Detailed, color-coded, meticulously maintained spreadsheets tracking my income, my bonuses, my property value. Columns estimating my available liquidity. Notes in Eleanor's shorthand, Cassie Q3 bonus, Sloan Barcelona residency, brownstone equity line, studio expansion. My hands shook. This wasn't occasional guilt tripping. This was systematic resource extraction. I was a column in their financial planning. 3 days after finding the spreadsheets, my bank called. Fraud detection. Multiple charges on a card I rarely used. An $8,000 charge at a Milan furniture boutique. $3,200 at a Parisian couture house. $1,500 at a New York spa. "The card is present transactions, ma'am," the agent said, "with PIN entry." That's impossible. The card is in my safe. Except when I checked, it wasn't. I remembered then, 6 months earlier, Eleanor had visited. She'd needed to book a last-minute flight home when her return ticket had issues. I'd given her the card for the booking. She'd never returned it. When confronted, her response was masterful deflection. "Darling, Sloan needed to furnish her new loft, and that spa day was after her gallery opening. So stressful. Don't be petty. It's just money." Just money, the phrase echoed. It was just money when it was mine. When it was theirs, it was respect. It was love. It was family loyalty. I hired a forensic accountant friend. What she found over the next week unraveled everything. Over the past 7 years, $287,000 in direct transfers to Sloan or my parents. 3 credit cards I'd believed were idle had been active, with $89,000 in cumulative charges. My signature forged on 2 loan applications. My social security number used to open a line of credit for my father's failed business venture. Worst of all, the brownstone I'd worked so hard to restore, the deed showed a mysterious family trust as co-owner with 25% interest, a trust I'd never signed over anything to. When I finally confronted them, Eleanor didn't deny it, she reframed it. "We're a family unit, Cassandra. Everything is shared. Your success is our success. Why are you suddenly being so individualistic?" Sloan added, "You act like you did this alone. Who supported you emotionally all these years?" The cognitive dissonance was staggering. My theft was their entitlement. My labor was their collective asset. My boundaries were my failure to love properly. Which brings us to Sloane's graduation, not from college, but from a prestigious and exorbitantly expensive 2-year curatorial fellowship at a New York museum. The same fellowship I'd paid for, after Eleanor explained, it's not a gift, it's an investment in her future earning potential. The Zoom uninvitation wasn't spontaneous retaliation. I learned later from a cousin that Sloane had a new boyfriend, the son of a major gallery owner. My presence, with my middle-class aesthetic and awkward quietness, apparently didn't fit the image she wanted to project. I was an embarrassment to the narrative she was crafting. So they cut me, cleanly, publicly. And in that cut, I found my freedom. After the Zoom call ended, I didn't move for an hour. Then I began. First, I called my lawyer, then the police, then every financial institution. The forensic accountant's report became my Bible. I filed identity theft reports. I initiated fraud investigations. I had the deed to my house corrected, revealing the family trust was just my parents and sister, their names added by a notary who happened to be Eleanor's brother.
Methodically, without anger, but with absolute clarity, I dismantled the financial web they'd woven around me. Then I did something more subtle. I reached out to every gallery, every institution, every contact in Sloane's art world, not to sabotage, but to clarify. Please note that I, Cassandra Vale, am not financially responsible for any commitments made by Sloane Vale or Eleanor Vale. Any representation otherwise is fraudulent. The museum hosting her graduation show called me. We have a contract here with your signature guaranteeing the costs. That's not my signature, I said, emailing them the forensic document analysis proving it. Silence. Then, the show cannot proceed without guaranteed funding. I didn't respond. Let them sit with that. They demanded another Zoom. This time, Eleanor's composure had cracks. You're destroying your sister's career over what? Money? Over the last 12 years, I said calmly, sharing my screen with the spreadsheet totals, $412,873, not including the fraudulent loans or property theft. Richard, my father, spoke for the first time in years with volume. We're your family. How can you be so cold? Cold? I repeated. You know what's cold? Finding out my childhood asthma medication was skipped some months because, as Mom told the pediatrician, Cassie's resilient and Sloane needs the ballet lessons more. You know what's cold? Hearing you laugh when I told you about being bullied, saying maybe if you tried harder to fit in. Family doesn't do that. Sloane snarled. You've always been jealous. You're just a boring architect while I'm creating real art. I opened a final file, images of Sloane's art alongside the original works she'd plagiarized from obscure international artists. Creating or appropriating? The color drained from her face. Where did you get those? The same internet where you found them, I said. Did you really think no one would notice? Eleanor's mask shattered completely. What do you want? Money? We'll pay you back. It's not about the money, I said. It's about the we. You've never said we about me, only about you three. I was never part of the we. I was the her, the resource, the thing. I took a breath. So here's what happens now. The fraud charges will be filed unless full restitution is made within 30 days. Sloane's show will proceed or not without my involvement, and I am removing myself from your lives completely. You can't, Eleanor cried, genuine panic in her voice. We're your family. No, I said softly. You're people I share genetics with. Family doesn't do what you've done. I clicked Leave Meeting as Sloane began screaming. The restitution came in jagged pieces. They liquidated investments, sold property, emptied retirement accounts. My father's brother intervened, horrified by what had been uncovered. The money returned to my accounts felt like contaminated currency. I donated half to organizations helping victims of financial abuse. Sloane's show was canceled. The gallery owner's son drifted away. The art world, once enamored with her, grew quietly cautious. My parents sold their home and moved to a smaller town. The story, filtered through relatives, was that I'd had a mental break and turned against them. Some believed it. Others, who'd seen the dynamics for years, reached out to me with their own stories. The most surprising development was my father. 6 months after the final reckoning, he showed up at my brownstone. He looked old, diminished. "I'm sorry," he said, the words seeming to cost him everything. "I knew. I always knew. It was easier to let you carry than to fight her." We sat in my restored parlor, sunlight through the original stained glass casting colored patterns on the floor. "Why now?" I asked. "Because I realized I lost both my daughters," he whispered. "One to entitlement, the other to survival." He didn't ask for forgiveness, he didn't make excuses, he just sat with the weight of his complicity. It was the most honest moment we'd ever shared. A year passed. I took a sabbatical from my firm and traveled to places I'd always wanted to see, not the luxury destinations Sloane preferred, but places with history. Rome, where I sketched crumbling aqueducts, Kyoto, where I studied temple joinery that lasted centuries, Cairo, where restoration teams worked tirelessly against time and elements. I began writing about architectural preservation, but also about what we choose to preserve in our lives. The essays found an audience. People wrote to me about their own families, the emotional hoarding, the relational rot disguised as tradition. One letter stood out. "You made me realize my mother wasn't just difficult, she was emotionally embezzling from me. Thank you for giving me the language to understand what I couldn't name." Language. That's what I'd needed all those years. Not courage, but vocabulary. Words to name the theft. Grammar to structure my resistance. 18 months after the Zoom call that changed everything, I received notice from a lawyer. My maternal grandmother, Eleanor's mother, had passed away. We'd never been close. Eleanor had limited our contact, saying Grandma Vivian was eccentric and negative. The will reading revealed why. Vivian had seen exactly what her daughter was, and she'd planned accordingly. Her entire estate, a surprisingly substantial portfolio of blue-chip stocks, and a beautiful, if faded, Victorian home in Newport, was left to me, specifically with the clause, "To my granddaughter Cassandra, who understands that true value isn't in what sparkles, but in what endures." There was a letter. "Dearest Cassie, if you're reading this, you've likely broken from your mother's gravity. I tried to warn you when you were younger, but Eleanor was clever about limiting our time. She knew I saw through her. Your mother was born needing to be the sun in every room. Your father chose to orbit her. Your sister learned to reflect her light. But you, my dear, you were always trying to grow your own photosynthesis. The house is yours. It needs love, like all old beautiful things. The money is yours. Use it to build something that lasts. And know this, family isn't a sentence, it's a story. You get to write your next chapter. With love, Grandma Vivian." I stood on the wraparound porch of the Newport house, salt air teasing my hair. The Victorian needed everything: roof, plumbing, electrical, soul. But its bones were sound. Its joinery was honest. Its beauty wasn't in perfection, but in having endured.
Today, I run a nonprofit from that Newport house. We preserve historically significant buildings, yes, but we also train survivors of family exploitation in restoration trades. We teach people how to rebuild literal structures while they rebuild their lives. My father visits sometimes. We restore furniture together in the workshop, speaking little but communicating in the careful placement of clamps, the patient application of glue. It's a start. Sloan launched a lifestyle brand for disenfranchised artists. It failed in 8 months. Last I heard, she's living with our parents doing influencer work. The universe has its own justice. Eleanor sends occasional emails, long, rambling missives about family and forgiveness. I don't respond, but I don't block her either. She's a reminder of what I walked away from. Sometimes, at night, I walk through the Newport house, my hand trailing along 100-year-old banisters. I think about Vivian, who saw me when no one else did. I think about all the people writing to me with their stories. I think about the apprentices in our workshop, learning that broken things can be made strong again, often stronger at the broken places. That Zoom call wasn't an ending. It was a demolition, the necessary destruction that precedes true restoration. And to you watching this, if any part of my story echoes in your bones, if you've been the shade plant in someone else's garden, know this: you can transplant yourself. You can grow toward your own sun. The first step isn't a dramatic confrontation. It's simply stopping the yes that should be a no. It's taking back your own water, your own light. Your life isn't their resource. Your love isn't their entitlement. And your story isn't over. It's just waiting for you to pick up the pen. So tell me in the comments, what's one thing you've been meaning to reclaim? And what's stopping you? Remember, sometimes the most powerful restoration begins with a single, quiet no.